And welcome, Rugby Rant fans. I'm the big guy, Scott Ferrara. That's Rob, the Hammerschmidt.
What going on?
Nothing, brother. We're coming at you with episode 170.
Yeah, baby.
Hitting you with 170. We just
It's a
keep
milestone.
going. We're like a bad case of syphilis. We show up at least once a week.
We just keep coming back.
Exactly.
When you
antibiotics aren't working. Penicillin's not helping anymore.
No. Al Capone had that problem.
Yeah, it killed him, unfortunately.
Yes, it
did.
But
just pay your taxes. Anyway.
Poor fella.
Anyway, we're here to hit you with another episode of the Rugby Rant. We had a super exciting week. Hammer had a big week away, a nice away trip with the wife, Mrs. Hammer, down to NOLA, watch the hounds, things of that nature. I'm sure he ate crawfish and mufaladas
Well, actually, it's funny to talk about crawfish. We didn't have any crawfish because the crawfish catch from the season was poor because they were so dry last summer. So it's like normally they were saying that the price of crawfish is about $3.50 a pound. Right now it's at about $7.50 a pound. So it's really hard to find quality crawfish right now. It wasn't as prevalent, but we ate like it ate pretty good. It was hard to have a bad meal there, let me tell you. I mean, even the breakfast had great stuff. I'm like, it was phenomenal. So really enjoyed ourselves, and good day of rugby. I'll talk about that. But a whole day of rugby was pretty cool. Tucker was upset because he was at home.
I was going to say, there's a gremlin here.
Yeah.
Even after midnight.
Yep. So there was that. And then what else went down there? Oh, yeah. I gotta say, Dave Clancy. Yeah, I'm looking at you, kid. Dude gave me shit all of Saturday, and it even blurred in onto Sunday, on social media, because going down there, what do I have? What do I wear? I wore a gold jersey because when in Rome, but I wore a Hounds shorts and a Hounds hat, right? So I figured they'd balance each other out, show my support for both teams, and the dude still gives me shit. So thanks a lot, Clancy. Clancy, I love you too. Back at you, brother.
Hey, listen, when you get invited and you're doing things with the owners of NOLA and the family of the owners of NOLA, it's hard to throw it in their face that your fandom. And let's be honest, NOLA was your original, and
OG.
People have originals. It's okay. That's what this young league is about. But we're gonna get into some more things when we talk about Around the Pitch. Hammer, you're going to kick us off with the first topic this week.
Oh, most certainly. Well, I mentioned at the top that when down in NOLA, there was actually a whole slate of things going on Saturday. It was pretty damned exciting. It was a lot of fun to be a part of. I went down there with Dan Falcon, my man, Danimal. We went down early, about 9 o'clock, to the gold mine. The NOLA Gold hosted a big college sevens tournament. Big shout out to Brendan Scripter, who ran the whole dang thing. Some of the officials that were on slate were some gold players, some boys from LU showing up right there. So anyway, a good time hand by all. But I want to talk about it. It's Brett Goodell Sevens. It started last year in 2023 as a memorial to University of Louisiana player Brett Goodell. Brett unfortunately passed away. He had been a player, and this tournament was created a memorial of him about a month after his passing. It has continued this year into 2024. 8 college teams, well, actually 6 total colleges, 8 teams came together from Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, and it was a round-robin tournament. So everybody got, 3 games. Won by LSU. They went 3-0, and they scored a total of 128 points. So they were the winner. Congratulations, LSU. In the second annual Brett Goodell Sevens. Next year, they want to expand the tournament, open it up to more teams. So you can go and contact Brendan at nolagoldrugby.com if you want your team to get in I guarantee they'll enjoy it, have a great time, and then I'm sure they'll piggyback that as a curtain raiser onto a NOLA Gold match.
That's awesome. They're looking to expand the tournament, get everybody in there. This weekend I know they had the qualifiers up on Niagara for the Collegiate Sevens in New York. See who's going to qualify for NCR and CRCs and the whole 9 yards. I got a friend of mine's son plays for Ithaca. I don't know how they did. I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out soon. Hopefully they qualified to make it that weekend. So now we're going to talk about something I want to talk about. We had the illustrious Hong Kong Sevens, and our buddy Dallin Stanford was going through his vault of pictures of his time with the Eagles and playing at the Sevens tournament, back in the day. But I wanted to talk about the women. The women secured second place, the silver medal, and we actually had two players make the dream team. Sorry, that's a little fuzzy. Alev Kelter and Alona Marr made the dream team in Hong Kong Sevens this past weekend. I believe the women are in third place overall or fourth place overall in the hunt for the HSBC Sevens title early on in the season. But shout out again to Alev Kelter and Alona Marr for making the dream team in Hong Kong Sevens and the women securing that silver medal. The men got to pick it up a little bit. Hong Kong Sevens is a tough tournament, but I think some growing pains and they'll get back into it.
Yeah, two absolute studs. Iona jumps into the team, which I think she's been in there the last two rounds, if I'm not mistaken, and just lights it up. Doing a great job on social media, really expressing, that women should be comfortable in their bodies no matter what they look like, making a lot of waves and making a lot of noise in support of women being comfortable with who they are. It's great stuff to see. I'm going to jump in with my second around the pitch topic. There seemed to be some confusion, of course, unless you're, living in a doghouse. That the Chicago Hounds have a mascot, and there was a big unveiling of the mascot's name, and it was Houndy McHoundface. And a lot of people said, "Is this April Fool's? This got to be April Fool's joke." And I put out there that it wasn't. That in fact it was Houndy McHoundface, because I had spoken to a couple people at the Hounds who were involved, and they too said, no, it's confirmed. Houndy McHoundface is in fact the name of the mascot. But as it turns out, it was April Fool's. I got confirmation from owner Peter Bernick that it is just simply Houndy. You know what? A lot of people made a big deal out of absolutely freaking nothing. It's like I said to Dan Falcon when we were hanging this weekend. I said, look, what are mascots for? What demographic do they appeal to? They appeal to kids. What do kids do? They name their animals, if left to their own devices, they name their animals silly names. But it's awesome because it engages them. I mean, like, I don't know. I think my nephews name their goldfish like Cheeto, right? I mean, stuff. The names are designed for them. The mascots are designed for them. Who cares what the name is, as long as the kids have fun with it.
Well, so for people who don't know, I forgot what town it was, but this was famous about 10, 15 years ago, when Twitter first came out, and they were naming one of their tugboats, I believe, this town that's on the water. And of course Bodie McBoatface was what that one. And since then, that has been the running theme.
One, Bodie McBoat,
yeah,
motorboat it.
But that's one of those kind of how that came about too. So it's online people trying to meme and bring that fire back of that joke. I personally voted and said it should be called Hammer. Didn't even make the top 4, which I found a little bit ridiculous.
I was a little bothered by that. I thought it was much more popular in places like Niagara Falls.
Houndy, welcome to the league. We love all of our mascots here. So, here's to a long and illustrious career. So in the same vein, I'm going to be talking about Chicago as well. Chicago Hounds were named the MLR Team of the Week for their win against NOLA Gold, 38-21. An upset win. NOLA was ahead of them. Still is ahead of them in the standings, but was ahead of them in the standings. And on Super Brew, less than 2% of people picked the Hounds to win, and I believe I have the stat here. SCCG scoring predictions had the win probability for NOLA at 65% and at the Hounds 31%, with a 4% chance of a tie, I guess. So interesting. Um, but congratulations to the Hounds, my newfound team, my fandom. So I wanted to give them a shout out. You were there, Rob. Real quick, how was it?
Oh man. I mean, it was, like I said, it was a great day. And part of that was the college, rugby that was going on beforehand. It made a great atmosphere. The weather was perfect. I mean, it was a lot better than the weather here in Chicago. From what I understand, it was like 45 and piss and rain all week. So I really enjoyed the great weather down there, but it was awesome. It was a great time. There was a number of Hounds fans down there, including many of the folks that work for the Hounds, and a few hot dog hounds that were showing up down there. Chef Art from Sporty Bird came down to visit, and we just had a wonderful time. And one of the cool things is, of course, the Party Shack, where people hang out afterwards, enjoy a few adult beverages, and get to meet some of the players. They come through and just are social. But it was a great day, and quite frankly, again, I really didn't cheer for either team. I was just happy nobody got injured. And I was happy to see, I really was happy that for the Hounds at the end of the day, because they really needed 5 points and they got it to really help them in the standings and solidify their place in the Eastern Conference.
Listen, it was a good match. I'm happy you enjoyed your time down there. Maybe next year, me and you go down there together. We'll leave Mrs. H at home. It'll be me and you going down there instead to have a good time. But it's funny.
We'll have to get some frozen daiquiris to go, because that is a thing, and it's freaking amazing.
But speaking of your NOLA Gold fandom, the past few years, NOLA Gold have been kind of had the title of one of the most penalized teams in the league, and with our new partner James Dealey coming on the show, the Hammer has kind of had this epiphany about maybe using some statistics. And we kind of had a little overview of what we want to look at as far as penalties so far in the first third of the season from 2023 versus this year, the first third of the season 2024. And after looking at those stats, that begs the question, because discipline is up, is this due to officiating or player conduct? And that is what we're going to rant about today. So before we hit the rant, check our sponsors out. I know we have new Anthem gear from shopmlr.com. We have new Hounds gear and new LA gear. So check out all the teams at shopmlr.com. But check out this quick advert, from us. We really like Shop MLR. I gotta be honest, Paladin. It really does. The quality is really good. The sizing, again, I could complain about, but I'm not going to, because the quality of the items are really good.
So it's interesting on sizing. One thing that I don't think I've talked about is like this training shirt, this Chicago Hounds white training shirt with the houndstooth in it. It's actually the training shirt. They're long in the torso. So one thing is nice for guys that have a little bit of a belly. You do get a little more length in the torso than you normally would for a shirt. Kind of makes it nice.
So you look pregnant.
Yeah, yeah, right. And by the way, you mentioned the Anthem gear. So they have 2 training shirts that are out. They have the 2 jerseys that are out. Hounds just the Shop MLR just dropped the Hounds hoodie and the Kappa hoodie. It's green, and the Hounds polo in green. Those 2 items are out. So, and then as you mentioned, LA, a whole range of gear from LA, like all kinds of things like hoodies, track pants, long sleeve trainers, all kinds of stuff. So a plethora of gear rolling in day by day. And man, you can get your Anthem gear before the game on Sunday. If you order tomorrow, it'll ship out by the afternoon, and you'll get it by Saturday. The Hammer guarantees it.
There we go. And shopmlr.com is powered by Rugby Now. Let's take a look at this quick word from them.
When we pick up the ball, we also pick up a legacy. A legacy that stretches beyond your current team. A legacy built on the backs of those who came before you with hard work. And for those who will come after you, we promise it won't be easy. But we'll be there, supporting you on and off the field.
So just to recap, we're going to be talking about discipline. Discipline seems to be up, and Rob's going to give you some statistics. But keep in mind, this is the question we're going to kind of talk about going forward. Because discipline is up, is this due to officiating or player conduct? Hammer, let us hear those statistics you had.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research. Occasionally I do that to prep for the show. And I found out
dangerous when you're thinking it's dangerous.
It is dangerous. My head damn near exploded. But what I hear, follow my logic here. So this is not perfect. All right, folks. I'm going to admit that from the outset. I did the best I could to make an apples and apples comparison. What I did was I took and I got the stats from this season, 2024, through week 6. So 1/3 of the way through the MLR season this season, and the total number of penalties conceded, total number of yellow cards, and the total number of red cards. What I did is I wanted apples to apples comparison. So I took and went to last year's totals of penalties conceded, yellow cards, and red cards, and I divided those by 3 to get an average through 6 games. So in other words, when I use those numbers of how many penalties conceded, yellow cards conceded, red cards conceded through 6 games, it is an average. It is not how many were conceded through the first 6 games. So I want to be careful about that. The numbers aren't exact, but again, it draws a good point of comparison for this conversation. That being said, what are our totals? 2023, a total number of 2,029 total penalties conceded throughout that season. I divided it by 3 and you get 676 in 2023. That compares to this year through week 6, 1/3 of the way, you get 763 total penalties this season. I believe that is an increase of 84, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, maybe, something, or maybe it's 74, excuse me. All right. Then you get to yellow cards. Okay. A total of 127 yellow cards in 2023. Again, divide by 3, you get a total of 42.3 yellow cards through 1/3 of the way of the season. Compare that to this season, 1/3 of the way through, you get 51 yellow cards. Again, a difference of roughly 9. Finally, red cards, again, less significant because there are traditionally significantly less of those offered, but through, let's see, a total number of 12 last year, 1 per team on average, but 4 total through 1/3 of the way through the season. This year, there's a total of 6. So again, up just a tick. So with that begs the question that Scott mentioned earlier, is it officiating or is it player conduct that's driving these numbers to look like they're a little bit higher as we get 1/3 of the way through the season this season?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, Rob. I think I'm going to go do that 50-50 if you'll allow me the chance to.
You're going to ride the fence. Be careful what happens when you ride the fence. You know what you got to protect.
Listen, they're small enough. They'll be fine. But in all seriousness, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we have a new head of officiating this year. I think we have a new way that the officials are looking at matches and deciding what they need to, I wouldn't say crack down on. I don't like to use that word, but as we know the way the officiating works in the MLR, they do look at trends to say, okay, what is going on in the game to then make a decision and kind of put down a fundamental to say, okay, we've been noticing an increase in offsides. We have to make sure we crack down on it because it's getting out of, I don't want to make it sound like the officiating's bad or anything like that, but you always need to have somebody looking at the officials and saying, what can we do better? Right. But I also think that we had so much turmoil and turnover in some of the rosters this season. You're going to get some of those penalties, right? So things like, intentional knocks, things like, side entry, maybe engaging in a maul too early, things like that, offsides, because you have teams that haven't gelled yet and they haven't had practice yet, and they're coming from LA and Anthem, well, specifically LA is a conglomerate of a lot of guys playing from a lot of teams. They have a lot of MLR experience. And Anthem, you have a lot of young guys playing some high-powered teams where you're going to have those mistakes because I think not that they don't call them in college, but you're going to see it more even in college when you're playing a collegiate opponent versus taking some of these young, Eagle-bound players and throwing them against a team like San Diego or Chicago or NOLA or the Free Jacks. So I do think it's a little bit of both, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, in my opinion. It just means that they are calling what they should be calling. It's a little bit more in the early years of the MLR. It seemed as though they kind of let some free play happen. I can remember in 2021, everybody talked about Lucas Rumball and he was the leader in ball steals at the Ruck, and I always felt, and there's video evidence of this, he was always on his elbows. They never called him for being off of, you're not supposed to support yourself that way on your elbows. But they let him do it. They didn't call it. And, he got the ball back for his team. And if it's not called, it's not a penalty, right? We can agree on that. If the referee didn't call it, it didn't happen. But my point being, those are things you have to look at throughout the season and say what's going on. And I think the officials are doing just that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of merits to what you said, Scott, to be honest with you. I really think so. One of the things that I would look at, excuse me, is I share in your generic perspective. I'd like to add in or sprinkle in a few items of note. And one of those is this. I think some of the more glaring calls as they're connected to red cards, I think some of the more glaring calls have risen the level of the conversation. So I'll point to Jamison Schultz, his tackle in the air of Billy Meeks a couple weeks back. Mm-hmm. That was a clear, dangerous situation and dangerous tackle. We see them with a moderate amount of frequency throughout rugby, all the way up to the international level. What I think is significant, it puts it on everybody's radar because he got the 5-game suspension, which a lot of people disagreed with, excuse me, that the length of that suspension, the length of that ban. And so it threw the issue of officiating on everybody's radar and kind of put the referees in the crosshairs. Now, I think that's more indicative of his behavior, and Scott and I differ in our perspective. Excuse me. We differ in our perspective on whether that ban was legit or not legitimate, or was too long or not too long. But the bottom line is it put it on everybody's radar. One of the other things that I would like to consider, that I think is important to recognize, is that as a result of what Scott mentioned, David Wilkinson, they have new processes in place this year with the head of officiating, David Wilkinson. And I think the officials are sticking to that process. And there's a great flow chart I think I've put up several weeks back of this. But in that process, they're sticking to it consistently. And isn't that what coaches and players want? It's one of the things that when I talked to Alan Clark about the issue from Seattle, he said that's all they can ask for is consistency and ask for a clear process. And that way the players know how to go forward. I also think, and I talked to Luke Rogan 2 weeks back about player conduct. That's one of the things they are looking more towards. So what's interesting is I do think there's a bit of an uptick in officials reversing calls, reversing penalties because of back chat or because of a punch thrown or a swipe or a jab at another player. So when they reverse those, again, it's going to add to the penalties, and it's something that players are not used to in past years that they're now calling. So it elevates that level of play.
I gotcha. I understand that. I think, I do think you also have, and maybe this is one of those things, is the question is, are the talks that are going on with officials, are they less effective. For example, it's well known you have scrum halves, you have leaders, you have seasoned veterans, you have coaches coming out as water boys in certain situations. And not necessarily that I would say it's back chat to the referee, but saying things like, "Hey, you got to look at the opposing number 12. He seems to be hitting that, getting that ball, pretty flat. You might want to have your AR check that." Again, don't feel that's back chat, Rob. I don't know if you would agree uh, in the definition of that.
No, that's not back chat. What I'm
Yeah.
seeing, what I got the impression from Rogan is that we're talking about clear disagreement with the official, right? And that's what happened in a particular case 2 weeks ago against Seattle. The Hounds got the benefit of a penalty. I think it was there was a not releasing call against Seattle. The penalty was going to be to the benefit of the Hounds, and then in what was said by one of the Hounds players. I was field side. There was something said by a Hounds player across the channel to one of the players from Seattle, and that's when Rogan immediately turned tail and awarded the penalty to Seattle. So it's not those, hey, have a look at this or have a look at that, or hey, I was under the impression that when the ball was put in the channel, we had to do this, or I was under the impression that we really had to emphasize a break foot or something like that, and actually asking for clarification by a player. I think captains can do that, right? And I think that's what officials would prefer, is that all those things go through captains. I think what's an issue is when players who are not captains call out officials, or say confront officials, or say things, or take swipes at other players on the other side of the aisle. And that's what the officials are taking exception to. It's something that, was some frequency would occur when I was playing in the men's club rugby game. It wasn't uncommon for them to reverse a penalty. And it was one of the things that kept us and our discipline in check. I think there's a tendency to not do it at the professional level. For what reason, I don't know, but they're putting an emphasis on it. Players have to make that adjustment, and maybe we'll see a decrease as the season wears on, and the numbers will be more consistent with last year. Just because, again, I didn't take the numbers through the first 6 weeks of last season. I did an average of
you extrapolated it out.
Yeah. Right. So, that's why I put a little caveat or asterisk there, just to be aware of that. But that's what it'll be interesting to come back to this conversation and see how, a true apples to apples comparison after 18 weeks, what's 2023 look like compared to 2024?
I mean, I think you want to talk about the JAMA thing. We both agree by the letter of the law that's a penalty.
Yeah.
So that's the red card. Nothing you could do about that. Do I feel there should be some discretion involved in those calls? Yes, but they've taken that out. So by the letter of the law, everything was done on the field. The question remains, what's the probationary period on somebody who has disciplinary issues? Do you have to go back that far to then add on X amount of things to say there's dangerous play, especially if a player had a completely clean, season in between, that's where me and Rob tend to differ. It's not necessarily on field. It's procedural and policy off field when they're looking at, some of these disciplinary issues. But in saying that, I do think one of the things you're going to see is I feel like, they've said, fans have said this throughout the seasons in MLR that they feel referees let too much go and this, that, and the other thing. So I tend to wonder, are the referees going to be a little heavy-handed to kind of say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we want the pace of play. This is how we want the play to be handled, especially early on, to make sure that none of that nonsense happens. To make sure that we have going into weeks 5, 6 to the second third of the season, and none of those shenanigans like talking across the channel or infamous pole Mullen slaps or guys throwing shoes. Guys throwing shoes, that type of shit, doesn't happen. Almost asserting
did that against Canada.
Yeah, Piffoletti did. It's funny because Piffoletti did that against Canada, and then Joe Marler did it in the Six Nations and didn't even get fucking called for it.
What wasn't he in tying a shoe, or did he throw a shoe?
No, I think Marler. No, somebody threw a shoe. Maybe it was Ellis Genge, but somebody definitely threw a shoe recently that I saw.
Yeah,
and I went, he didn't even get a friggin' penalty, and Piffoletti got like a yellow card. sent off for it. Which come on, like talk about lack of consistency. There's obviously something going on there where somebody was not given the right way. It's either a send off or it's not, or it's getting. In my opinion, it's a piece of equipment in the middle of the field that can get somebody hurt if the shoe came off. It's not like Piffaletti ripped it off his foot and then tossed it. But anyway, but I think maybe So I wonder, and this is a question for Rogan. Is there not necessarily a mandate, but are you pressing officials to be like, make sure you call it, make sure you're steadfast, make sure you're consistent in your calls, so that way guys know, we're not screwing around here, because this is a new position for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So two things, Scott. Now, number one, Jamison. It's funny. We'll get to that in a second. But I think you're onto something, right? It's like, as a teacher, right? My philosophy on my discipline in the classroom was, at the start of the year, I can always come in a little bit heavy on my discipline, right? Because you can always back off as you get to know kids, as they get to know you, as you get through the semester, you can begin to back off a little bit. And maybe you won't be as heavy-handed as you move through the semester. You can, as you get to know kids, how their personalities are, and you can handle them in a variety of ways, right? But if you're too easygoing at the start of the semester, it's really hard to roll back and start to increase your discipline. So maybe that's the message. It's kind of, comes into what you were talking about with regard to the officials and how they've begun the season. But if you could put up that screenshot I just put on there, I'd like, and this is a disadvantage to our listeners that are coming through the radio, or maybe I'll throw.
I saw it. Yep. There you go.
There we go. So I want to describe for this. This is a flow chart for you folks that are just listening and not watching. Maybe you can come back and check this out, because I think this is worthy of seeing. Basically, it starts with a question. Has there been foul play? Yes or no? So there's where our flow chart goes. It goes out to the right and left. If no, play on, no penalty assessed, right? But if yes, it goes down to, what are the facts, right? So take that Jamison Schultz situation. Was Billy Meeks in the air? Yes. Are you allowed to hit a player in the air? No. Did Jamison hit him in the air? Yes. Did Billy Meeks land on his head? That's debatable. I mean, it's real tough. He looked like he landed on his head and shoulder, but anyway, that's how he landed, right? Did Jamison wrap? Yes, he did. But he'd still, landed on his head and shoulder. And then it gets into, was there indirect contact? No, there wasn't. There was direct contact. Was head or neck contact with low level of danger? No, there was, it was a high level of danger. So you've got this green for indirect contact, this yellow for head and neck contact, column with low level of danger. And then the red column is direct head or neck contact with high level of danger. And I think that's where the interpretation came in on Schultz on the field, right? He landed on his shoulder, but if you look, he also kind of landed on his neck, not so much on the top of his head, certainly like on an ear or side of his head. And I think that's where the interpretation, and that's where people got rubbed the wrong way. But guys, they went through this process that you're looking at. If you're watching, on Facebook, or you're watching, on a video, the video delivery here, it's a really useful chart. They followed this. This is the system. This is the process. And I think they've been pretty consistent on why they've doled out yellow versus red cards. Again, apply the kick to his from Ezekiel Lindenmuth from Houston 2 weeks ago to Seattle, right? Was there direct contact? Was there a level of danger? There was a level of danger. What was it? Well, it wasn't indirect contact. He hit him in the shoulder. He didn't make head or neck contact. He tried to, but it's not about it. You can't really look at the intent per se. Yeah. Again, it goes then, what's the aggravating factor? And red card with mitigation applied. Well, again, he didn't make head or neck contact. So, it kind of figures into the yellow card column. So, again, I think it's been pretty consistent with the help of the TMOs.
It's funny. So that I wonder, because obviously any contact with a player in the air is going to be a call. If you look at the video, Gamma kind of commits and then decommits. He wraps but he doesn't commit to the
It's
tackle.
kind of like the NIL money nowadays.
Yeah.
You commit and then you decommit.
I feel like, I wonder if he had committed to the tackle, right?
Yeah.
And Billy Meeks doesn't flip, and he just puts him down. And I'm not saying he upends him, but if he just grabs him to create the tackle and then puts him down, because that's realistically what could have happened if he completes his tackle. If you see it, maybe he only gets a yellow, and it's not a suspension. You know what I mean? So it's funny. I think he was stuck in an odd place. Again, the card itself, in my opinion, shouldn't be based upon intent. My question is, when they're doing the disciplinary for it, while I understand the player in the air is not at fault, Billy Meeks knew what he was doing by going in the air that close to somebody.
Well, yeah, he jumps in the air, right,
and
going
and
forward,
picks his knees up to his chest.
Yes,
and
but
again,
you're taught to do that to protect yourself.
Correct, but that's also what's going to upend you if you do get touched in the air. So there's also a question out there. One, the actual if Jameson Fonana-Schultz completed the tackle, and again, not up over ended and drove him into the ground, but just completed the tackle and put him on the ground, would that mitigate any head and neck contact because Billy Meeks wouldn't have landed on his head? What then at what point, that probably becomes a yellow, right? Is there a suspension afterwards? And then secondly, do we need to go back and say we need to teach guys how to better defend themselves when they're in the air? Because he didn't go up with just the one knee. You see a lot of guys go up with the one knee and the 1 foot straight up. And that 1 foot straight up is what you're generally going to land on. And that one knee is going to protect you from the contact. He went up with 2 friggin' knees. At no point was he going to put his feet on the ground. And again, he's allowed to do that. But in a day and age when we're looking at ways to protect players from head injuries like that, to just say it's only Jameson Fonana-Schultz's fault because the way the laws are written, that's how you have to give him a card, I don't think is necessarily correct. In my
Interesting take. Yeah. Do teams need to look at the way players go up into the air and really consider how that might impact, head contact situations, head trauma situations?
Right. Well, I mean, if you looked at if I don't want to go back to it, but if you looked at some of the factors that talk about, on the side, there's keynotes on that flow chart you did. Was there significant head drop? So they're looking at players who have the ball, who drop their head height significantly going into contact to mitigate when it comes a red, a yellow, or a penalty. So my point is, we're already looking at the player going up with the ball, right, or who has the ball going into contact. Rather, do we need to again say if you're going up with 2 knees? Maybe that's a penalty. Maybe you have to keep, only go up with 1 knee. Make they're doing it in the NFL, right? They just got rid of the hip drop tackle, right? Because they had a significant increase in injury due to this tackle, right? So they said, okay, we have to ban it. Again, I'm not saying ban the kicks or banning guys going through in the air, but I do feel like Billy Meeks knew what he was doing, and he runs the risk of doing it. But at a certain point, while you want to have the tackling player be in control of their body, in my opinion, he jumped up out of control. He was not in control of his body.
And that's what I disagree. I think he was in control of his body. You expose yourself when you go into the air and you leave contact with the ground, but he was control of his body. It wasn't like he was already starting to roll forward and get upended before Schultz made contact with him. So
my point is, if you're running at the defender and you're jumping with both knees in the air with forward momentum, you're not in control of your body because you're going to make contact with the guy who's 6 inches in front of you when you started to jump. It's not like he jumped. Jameson Fonana-Schultz was essentially standing there, and Billy Meeks jumped at him. If you watch the play, there wasn't that much forward momentum. Now, I'm the other guy who touched Billy. Different story. He came in with forward momentum. He didn't even get a fucking card. But my thing is, it seems like Jamma wasn't even. He was kind of just standing there. And Billy Meeks was going into him, and I think one, the call on the field is a call on the field based upon what the rule is. I get that. I'm not arguing that, but I do think we have to look at it. because at that point, then it just becomes every guy's gonna do that to get the penalty. They're gonna look at that's the playbook. Just go up there to get the ball.
I don't know.
And make sure you make contact with the defender.
You can't convince me that it's a good idea to go up like that just to draw the penalty. Because he came down with some pretty significant force onto, right around the shoulder, that neck, and close to that head area. That's a dangerous and precarious situation to put yourself in.
I know, but he put himself in that. But again, he put himself in that. When you look at the contact, in my opinion, he puts himself in that situation, and there's nothing that the defender can do, because the defender is going to be the one that's penalized, right, if he touches him at all.
Yeah. And don't forget, I think the situation was unique too in this fact. So normally, typically, where do we see a player jump in the air like that? Under a high ball, right? Mm-hmm. And high balls are kicked way up. And we're seeing hang times somewhere between 4.5 and 4.9 seconds, right? Of the ball being in the air. And, a player is looking up at the ball, they're tracking the ball, they jump up to try to get it as apex. But typically in that situation, they're jumping straight up to get the ball, because the ball is typically coming straight down and then up and under. This situation was different. Remember, that ball was coming in from a throw-in, and I believe is it not coming in from a line out that went too far? It bounced on the ground and they come up in the air. What do we do? It's a 50-50 ball for the teams, right? So your guys that are coming from that 10 meters back behind the line out are running up to try to get possession of the ball. So it's not like they're jumping straight up for that ball, because they're trying to get at its apex, a ball that's come up, and they're coming right under it. They're going forward with momentum and force to try to get to that ball before the opposition. It's just because the ball bounced so high, Billy had to jump up to get it. So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a rare instance, but it certainly is not the most common time in which we see, somebody get upended like that, where there is more time to, as you're running on as a tackler, to make a judgment about the timing of when that player is going to get the ball and land on the ground, and when you can make a legal tackle.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I agree that it's unusual, but I also feel like if you're going to tell the player who's essentially not moving, they have to be in control of their body, when somebody jumps up off the ground and is coming at you, we have to figure out what is reasonable to say that player in the air needs to control his body to. Because at that point, what's more, in my opinion, what's more stable? The player sitting there on the ground like this, or the guy in the air with forward momentum looking at a ball? And again, that's not to say that every time somebody does that should be a penalty. But I think we either need to figure out a way that the player in the air can protect himself better from any type of contact, or you have to amend touching a player in the air and say, if you sit there with your fucking arms down and he hits you, that's on him.
Yeah, well, if you just be clear, like Jamison didn't have his arm down. Jamison, it looked like clearly, and I think people were right in this case that he tried to wrap him up and tried to slow Billy from landing on his head and neck.
Exactly, he tried to make the tackle. No. In this case, he was trying to make the tackle, and again, he kind of committed, and then he realized he's in the air. I'm not supposed to touch him and let go.
Right.
I think that's what caused more of that rotation for Billy. And again, since he touched him, I'm saying that's correct. Like, again. But I'm also saying, what are you supposed to do in that scenario? And then to give him a 5-week ban, because you're going back 2 years from the last time he had discipline, which was about a fight and throwing punches, if you remember, which wasn't, in my opinion, is two different things. Right. I know in rugby law and what you're talking about might not be two different things, and how they look at it. But my point is, if you have a punch up after the play and get suspended, or you hitting somebody with a shoulder charge in the face 4 times and getting suspended, in my opinion, is different.
But I have an idea, Scott. I think we should try to see if we can get David Wilkinson on the show sometime to talk a little bit about your idea of maybe looking at how a player goes up and competes for the ball.
Mm-hmm. We also need to bring him in and ask him about that 4th scrum official that comes in on a segue that strictly wasn't forward their entire life. They come in on the other side of the scrum. They call the scrum penalties because all those guys, skinny guys inside, don't know what they're doing. But before we get to we're gonna. I think we had a pretty healthy debate on this, and you and I are not always on the same side of the spectrum, and I always respect your opinion, regardless if I agree
100%.
with it or not. And this is an ongoing conversation me and Rob have almost daily about penalties, individual penalties, overall penalties, health of the league as far as gameplay and different things and different levels. So, it's good to kind of talk about it on the show sometimes too, and kind of get into it. But, if you haven't joined the Super Brew League, we're going to give you the winner in a little bit, but check out our Super Brew League here, sponsored by Shop MLR, and you can win some vouchers. Rob, let us know who our Super Brew winner of the week was this week.
Yeah, week what are we? Week 6 now. Week 6 went to Super Brew winner Brian Hayes. He is a Hounds fan. He won himself $25 in coupons to Shop MLR. I'm pretty sure with some of the new drops recently on Shop MLR of Hounds merch that Brian will be looking forward to wearing a sweet kit like this one, or maybe the new polo or the green hoodie that's just been released. But there's some really, really great gear there. And if he gets on it right now, he can get his gear for Sunday's match versus the Anthem. Congratulations to Brian Hayes for his victory.
Awesome. And guys, remember, you can start right now. If you win, you get $25 gift certificate the week you win. If you win overall, we have a gift certificates for first, second, and third place this season. And if you start now, it's still early enough to win at the end of the season. You have some people who forget to make picks. You have some people who forget to put in scores. That's a direct knock on our girl, Karen Gaz Marino. She had Nola to win, but didn't put a score in. Interestingly enough, I don't know if it was 6-5 and pick 'em for her on that one, and she picked Nola or what. But I noticed that looking at some of the statistics. But it's still early enough to join. It is free to join, and you have the opportunity to win some stuff. So let's give you, we do our lock of the week presented by Shop MLR and Rugby Now.
The Rugby Rant's lock of the week.
Hammer, you're up, brother.
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting matches. So let's go through the matches. Utah at Dallas, Free Jacks at Cats. That's going to be the one to watch. Anthem at the Hounds. I'll be there. Say hi if you're around in Chicago. NOLA at San Diego. Seattle at LA. Some interesting matchups. But of all of them, I'm interested in this Utah at Dallas match. And I'm going with Dallas. They're on a hot streak. They're playing really well. They're scoring some points. I think they're getting some continuity going. They're a team to look out for. They'll have to be in the hunt in the upcoming weeks. We get to later stages of the season because right now Houston is en fuego and Seattle is actually on top in points in the standings. But it's going to be an interesting battle in the West.
Yeah, listen, Dallas in that first half against Seattle, their first start, the starters, I should say, forwards against Seattle really dominated their pack and with the rolling maul. The subs a little not as perfectly played, but it was a really good match. Seattle had to come back and really, pump one out to win it. And you talk about the Houston match. That's going to be my lock of the week. I got the Houston SaberCats over the Free Jacks. You have Houston coming off a bye. I have Free Jacks coming down to Houston to the stadium to play. I'm giving. I honestly, on paper, it's a rather even matchup. So the only reason I'm going Houston is I'm giving them the -3 for playing at home, but I do have them beating the Free Jacks.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Listen, you talk about Seattle being at the top of the table. I believe they're only 2 points ahead of Houston, but they also have a game in hand, which is a loss. They're 5-1 versus Houston,
right.
5-0 based upon the
right
bye weeks we've had so far. So
yeah, well, I think Seattle is just 1 point. They have 24 to Houston's 23, but and Houston has a game in hand, so it should be rather interesting on the upcoming week. I'm looking forward to a good slate of games this weekend. To be honest with you, it's going to be exciting. And once again, we have five games on tap this weekend, so it should be a solid week.
Yes, one on Friday, one on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. Yep. We're back to Sunday matches. Love to see it. Now that I think what you're going to see is now that the NCAA brackets are over, you're going to see a lot more robust television coverage of all the matches.
Ooh, and speaking of brackets, no, I didn't go to Home Depot. Next week, we're going to be talking a lot of college rugby, because there's going to be a lot of college rugby. It's happening. We got NCRs happening, the sevens tournament, and we've got the CRA D1A 15s tournament that's into the Elite 8. That'll be happening next weekend. So we're going to be talking with Ryan Ginty of Next Level Rugby, who produces some great rugby content. And we're going to be talking about his show for Selection Saturday, preempting the MCRs and the tournament that happens in sevens national qualifiers.
That's awesome. We always love Ginty coming on and talking collegiate rugby and rugby in general. We appreciate all the work he does. Guys, this is a done and dusted topic here. I think we kind of exhausted our thoughts.
For this week. We tenderized it and beat the shit out of that moment.
So again, really appreciate you, Hammer. Love to debate this stuff with you. Love being on the show with you.
Back at you, bro.
So glad. Yeah, thanks. So glad you enjoyed your time over.
I gotta say, you've been looking a little down and sullen lately, and I can't help but to think it's because New York doesn't have a team. I sure hope they get a team next year so that you perk up and you're again Chatty Scotty again.
Funny story. My father, Easter, I was smoking some ribs and my father was over and he's like, man, you did a lot of yard work recently. Like, hopefully you can keep up with it. And I'm like, well, last year I used to have to go to 2 different soccer practices on Saturday, 2 different soccer games on Sunday. And I had tickets to Rooney, or they were playing away and I was going to watch parties. So like, all my Saturdays and Sundays are taken up, and now I can, lazily listen to matches or do things on my phone and blow the leaves and cut down trees and stuff,
Wait a minute. Now it's all coming together for the Hammer. If I'm not mistaken, I remember some cows wandered onto your field and were eating your grass. That was intentional, bro. You opened the gate to allow those cows to come onto your property because you didn't have time to mow your grass. You figured you just let them graze and your grass would be mowed naturally.
I know. This is straight dad talk. I'm still pissed off because there's about a dozen cows that got on the property. I have these huge fucking divots in the yard because the property we own is right in the watershed area, so it's very soft, and especially those cows coming in around. It was last fall, and the ground was super super wet, and there's just fucking like 4-inch divots everywhere. And knock on wood, they were up and down all over my septic system, and luckily they didn't puncture the septic tank. That would have been a fucking disaster. But anyway, guys,
there've been shit all over the place. Cow shit, human shit, everything else.
I got the baby, so human shit everywhere, right? That's Rob the Hammer Schmidt.
Yo.
This is the Rugby Rant. We were on fire today, fellas, and we'll see you with the next.